Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Today I want to talk about food storage tips. So how I keep food for longer in the fridge without it spoiling. Obviously, none of this is like, what do you call it, FDA approved or food safety standards, but what I think we're all going for is that the food we eat doesn't make us sick, and I like to be able to store my food for as long as possible without, having to can it or freeze it or something. So these are the tips that have helped us store food for longer, and I'm going to share them with you now. Okay, so when you initially cook a big pot of food, make sure that you bring all of it to a minimum of 160 degrees. That way all the bacteria is dead. Once it gets cool enough that you can put it in a container and it's not going to make your fridge all steamy, put it away. Don't wait until it's been cold and sitting out for, an hour or whatever. Just make sure as soon as you feel like it's ready to go in the container and it's not going to make the fridge all hot, that you put it straight in the fridge. If you leave the lid off when you put it in the fridge, then that helps the food come down to fridge temperature much quicker than if you put the lid immediately on. So if you just put the food in the container, put the container in the fridge, and leave the lid set aside on the counter until like you go to bed or something, and then stick it on, that helps a lot. Or even wait until the next morning, depending on what it is. So the logic behind that being that if it's being forced to stay at a warmer temperature for longer because all the cool air from the fridge can't reach it as well with the lid on immediately, then it gives it opportunity to grow bacteria at just sort of this perfect warm bacteria growing temperature, rather than if it's chilled as quick as the fridge can chill it with the lid off, then the bacteria doesn't really have much of a chance to grow, or much less. Okay, so next, when you make a big batch of something, make sure that the containers are not huge. So like, I don't usually put more than probably a 1.5 gallon container in the fridge at once, 1 to 1.5 gallon. So if I made a big batch of food and I have, 3 gallons worth, I know that's not typically, I don't typically store my food in gallon jars in the fridge, but just to be clear, I'm not going to put, like a big, huge pot of food in the fridge because it's going to take the center a really long time to get cooled. So if I were to have, 3 gallons of food, then I'd put it in 3 separate containers and I'd try to spread those containers out throughout the fridge so that as much cool air can get to them as possible. And I don't have a stack or 2 layers. I just have everything that's warm being exposed to as much coldness as possible and not being kept warm by another warm container right next to it or right under it. If you do store a large container of food in the fridge, then and you're wanting to keep it for a while, then make sure when you dish up for the next meal that you're using it for, that you take from the center, and that way the center part that is cooled the latest in time compared to the edges is being used first. That way it doesn't have a chance to grow bacteria, so you wouldn't want to stir it. You just take out your container, dig right into the middle, and then that would be your meal portion for that night. If you want to cool a really large pot of food that you have down very quickly, because I know sometimes I'll make like a big batch of soup and it takes almost till bedtime for it to cool down if I make it for supper. So if you want to cool it quickly, you can wash out your sink and fill it with cold water and even put in an ice pack or two and put the pot in there. Obviously, you have to be careful to make sure you don't accidentally run water into the sink because then the pot will get water in it and it'll spoil your food. A warning though, when you fill the sink, make sure that you keep the pot out until you're done filling the sink, because there was a time where I thought that I'd be able to catch it in time. So I'll explain. I put the pot of food into the sink full, or that was filling with water. And once it got full enough, then the pot started floating and it floated right underneath where the water was coming out, because whatever scientific reason that is, where the water is coming down into the sink is where the pot gets pulled to. And so then my pot got water in it. And that time I was able to save it because I was able to just kind of pour it out, extra water, with what I'd made, but it's not ideal. So just make sure if you do that, that you fill your sink with water and then put in the pot. If it's not enough water, then you can take out the pot again and just set it next to the sink, and then finish filling the sink and put the pot back in. Okay, another tip is fridges have, those little dials where you can make the fridge colder or warmer. So if you put a thermometer in your fridge, then you can adjust the dials and see where they're at, what temperature is making the fridge. Ideally, between 38 and 40 is best. If you make it a lot colder, then things can, depending on where they are in the fridge, can start getting frozen. But when you have your fridge at 40 or 38 or 39, it makes the food last so much longer. But do be careful, because even with that temperature, still occasionally there'll be a place in the fridge that will tend to freeze things. So you definitely want to be aware of that, so you don't, put a salad there and then go, oh no, all my lettuce is frozen. Okay, so my next tip is when you are getting out the big container of food and you want to dish up some for a meal, make sure that the utensil you use is very clean. That way you're not bringing bacteria into the container. And then also make sure that you minimize the amount of time that the container's out of the fridge. So just get your pot ready, get the food out of the fridge, stick in your clean utensil, dish up how much you want, and then put the container back in the fridge. That way it's not sitting out, starting to warm up, and therefore giving bacteria a chance to grow. Just put it right back in, and then it'll stay fridge temperature. My next tip is when you go to heat food that's been in the fridge for a few days, say you made like a casserole or something, then make sure that you heat it up to 160 degrees. That way, if any bacteria started to grow, then it will be killed. So that's a really simple tip. And in the fridge, there is airflow, so it's not like canning where botulism is going to grow. I mean, I'm sure it technically could, but it would be unusual. So I think those are all my tips. And when I do that, I'm usually able to get my food, like a pot of soup or a casserole. I'm usually able to get it to last about a week, and it doesn't start going bad at all in that amount of time. So those are my tips. Obviously, do what works for your family, and this isn't like certified or FDA approved, but they're things that have really helped us, and the amount of time that it saves me to not have to cook something every day for supper, and also every time you cook, you make a bunch of dishes, versus with this technique, you're able to just get out a serving spoon and a pot and a lid and heat it in there. And especially if you make a one-course dish, obviously. If you make more than one-course dish, you're going to have a few more dishes than one pot and lid and spoon. But it's still so worth the time save, because then I don't have all the dishes to wash, and I don't have a dishwasher, so that might mean more to me than some people with a dishwasher. But it just saves me so much time, because then I'm not cooking every day. I don't have dishes to wash every day, or just a few if I do. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything you do to keep your food stored longer. And I'll see you next time.